shoot. Okay.
Is there an electric shock under there that's...
Oh, I tell you, it's the weirdest feeling because it feels like it's going to, well, and it will. If I move it the wrong way, it'll twist. And my whole body will twist with it, and I end up on the floor sometimes. It's not
Oh,
very pretty.
that's your nerve going all the way down.
Okay, that's a shame. All right. Okay, so let's all relax now. So bring your mental attention to your body sitting here. And just check in with your body, see how it's doing. And then take a few deep breaths. And then just place your awareness at the sensation of the breath going in and out of the body, either at the tip of the nose or as your belly rises and falls. And just try to let any thoughts about what you were doing 5 seconds ago or what you'll be doing later, just let them float through the mind like clouds in the sky. And just anchor your mind on that sensation of the breath. Now bring to mind the reason you came this evening. And based on that reason, try to set a strong intention to use your time well. Not just for your own benefit, with the wish that it will ripple out to benefit others as well. And when you're ready, just bring your awareness outward to the class. Did anybody who was here last week have any questions from that? You can't hear me. This is not on. Is it on now? Yes. I tell you not to do that, but it's really bad for the microphone, which kind of makes sense. But it's very hard not to do. Okay, did anybody have any questions from left over from last week? So many. Did you have one that you're burning to ask?
No, I'll just wait.
Wait, feel free.
Okay.
I put it out there. Okay, all right.
So I have a question. Is this the end of the whole path, or this is the beginning of the new semester, or I don't?
It's both. Okay. Okay, so since this course is an overview of the entire path to enlightenment, it's a really good course as a review for people who've been doing all of the DBs, as a sort of like, have you put the pieces together, so that you can see how the path unfolds. And for people who are new, it gives you an overview to start with. It's actually course 3. I don't follow directions, so I just never could figure out the reason it's 3. But since Anthony has taken all the classes, he needs this one to have completed all of them, so so it had to be the last one. Oh, I moved too fast. Not you, Anthony.
No, I know.
He's
I
not
was
here.
wondering
That's
where
why
he
we
is.
have to. No, he's in Chicago or
Oh.
something, so we have to record it. Okay. So, did people glance at the sheet of the? I don't know why I ask these questions, but I'm going to anyway. The Lam-Ram, what's it called? That's what I want to do. It's called the Basic Lam-Ram Outline. I had put it up on the screen last week.
Yes, yes.
Okay. So I thought I'll do it again. I'll put it up on the screen again. So that we have a context. So the Lam-Ram is it means graduated path. So like one of the major texts in this tradition, in the Galupa tradition, is Lama Tsongkhapa's The Great Treatise on the Graduated Path to Enlightenment. And it's a commentary on Lama Atisha's Lamp to the Path of Enlightenment, which is one of those short, it's a short text. So Lama Tsongkhapa expanded upon it a couple of 100 years later. I think Lama Atisha was in the 8th century, and Lama Tsongkhapa was in Lama Atisha may have been in the 10th century. 11th century. I get those years. I always have to go, okay, 20th century, it's 1900s. Lama Tsongkhapa was in the 1300s. So there was a couple of 100 years in between Lama Atisha and Lama Tsongkhapa. I am not a history person. Terrible at history. Anyway. So the graduated path is, or the Lam-Ram, is an attempt to kind of take all the 84,000 teachings of the Buddha and put them in a very methodical, laid out, clear instructions for the path. And it really, if you've ever read the Lama Tsongkhapa's text, the English version's in 3 volumes. It's like a to-do manual. It's exactly what you're supposed to do, which is kind of daunting. But so as you can imagine, it's like the thought of taking all the teachings of the Buddha and then trying to put them in this clear, easy to follow guidebook. It's really quite an accomplishment. It's incredibly helpful. So, but it doesn't mean we all start in the same place, or that we learn this thing, these steps in some sort of orderly fashion. We try to get familiar with the order because it helps explain the path. They fit together well that way. But of course, there are going to be some topics that we're going to meet and kind of not understand at all until much later, as we learn more about other things. And then other parts will just be, oh yeah, I get that, no problem. So it's not like you have to start at the beginning and then when you master the first step, that you have to, before you proceed to the second topic. It's not like that at all, thank goodness. I don't know why this is. So, as I said last week, they broke down the Lamazon Kappa, Lama Tisha, they put the teachings into 3 groups. Basically those for students that were a bit, at the beginning, beginner capacity, then those who are at the middle, and then those at the grade level. And this is oriented around what the students, what their goal is. So the beginner level, beginner student of the Dharma, their goal is to figure out how to reduce suffering in this life and also how to have a good rebirth and have less suffering in the next life. And so their focus is really on, death and impermanence, accepting that they need to start practicing now, that they need to understand what's the cause of ending up in a, undesirable rebirth, which means they need to understand karma, cause and effect. So last week we talked about how with the 4 Noble Truths, we had the truth of suffering, which we kind of don't even hardly have to explain because we all get that one. Then there's what? That was a question.
The cause of suffering.
The cause of suffering. So this is the truth of the cause of suffering. So if you want to reduce your suffering, you need to understand what's the cause of suffering. And then the Buddha taught the truth of cessation. He wanted to make it clear that we don't talk about suffering and the origins of suffering and then say, sorry, there's nothing you can do about it. So too bad. So the cessation of suffering, that suffering actually can end. And then finally there's a method. So the truth of the path out of suffering. Path. My southern path. So, so for all 3 capable beings, this understanding the origins of suffering is vital to, to being able to reduce your suffering, because if there's a cause of suffering and everything that we experience is a product of past actions, then we need to know which actions are causing our future suffering and which actions cause us enjoyment and pleasant experiences, give us resources and all sorts of things like that. So really understanding karma and what actions are to be adopted and what actions to be abandoned are a critical foundational piece of the Dharma. And then going for refuge is a way to, it's not something you do as a brand new student, it's something you do over time after you've kind of looked at the teachings and you put them into practice and you've had some experience of it and you have so you develop some confidence in the teachings. And then you might go for refuge, which just means you're relying on the instructions of the teachings and to guide you towards happiness and interrupt your habits that the Buddha says lead to suffering. Make sense so far? So that's at the beginning. And notice the goal is a happy rebirth. So one of the distinctions they make is that any activity you do for happiness in this life is not Dharma. It makes sense to do things for happiness in this life, but you want a longer goal than that. Because consequences, like we discussed last week, the position of the Buddha is that there is no beginning or end to our consciousness. So this means that it's going to be back. It actually doesn't go anywhere. But, so what we do in this life is going to have consequences in future lives. So if all we're worried about is what it will do for us in this life, we're not going to make much progress. Because we will often make short-term decisions. We see this all the time. You know, governments do it, bosses do it, you know, we all do it. We all make choices that kind of go, oh, well, you know, yes, I know in the long run it's probably not good for me, but, you know, maybe I won't live that long. I won't have to worry about it. Hence why you have, you know, posters that say, if I knew I was going to live this long, I would have treated myself better. So, you know, this is, you know, so we do that. So this underscores the importance of really having the long view of Buddhism, you know, so that if you're on a spiritual path, it's not just about this life, it's about your impact. I mean, so it's not just, you know, like in one way you could look at it, is that just as we know our actions, you know, in the everyday sense, impact future generations. You know, so we see that with the environment. You know, that it's the same kind of thing. If you want to care about, you know, the effect of your actions in the future, you know, this is, you know, this is good advice to follow. So was that a question or just a clearing of the throat? That's not what I wanted. I'm really bad at this. So,
I do have a question. What do you think makes it so difficult to remember those past experiences?
do you remember everything you did last week?
I mean, I'd like to be able to, then I could really learn something from it.
No, I mean, so this is, it's what causes us to have problems remembering in this life?
Distractions.
There we go. What else?
Not studying,
Not
not focusing.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, we just, for all the same reasons that we can't remember, you know, half of what we do, 10% of what we do or think, you know, is the same reason, one of the same reasons we don't remember in next lives. We are distracted. We don't have focus. A yogi who has really developed their ability to concentrate can eventually start remembering their past lives. That's one of the consequences. It's a type of clairvoyance. And not only can they, you know, remember their own lives, they can start to see in the minds of others.
That's cool.
I remember having a teacher one time, and this other nun was kind of going, you know, I really don't like to walk places with Geshe-la because I really think he can read my mind, and it's never very pretty. So anyway, so this is why I'm talking about this, you know, overview of the whole path. And, you know, it's connecting all these pieces that you have, you know, so we're, you know, it's coming from the perspective that our consciousness never ends. So what we do in every life, you know, is part of what develops our habits of mind and our habits of speech and our habits of body. So, you know, like when children are born and you know, in the same family, and you see that the children, like, are not little carbon copies of each other. You know, in Buddhism we just say it's because they're bringing their habits with them. They're not a clean slate or a new slate. You know, it's just, you know, we come with habits already, you know, in our mind. So, and these are carried forward. What changes, of course, from life to life are our conditions. Of course, it changes from moment to moment as well. But, you know, having, you know, those of us here have a good rebirth. You know, we have pretty good conditions compared to lots of people on the planet. You know, so certainly lots of animals on the planet, lots of insects on the planet. And those are some of the conditions. So those conditions are sort of like the setting for our different habits of mind to arise. You know, you meet certain conditions. That's part of what causes karma to ripen, is the conditions we meet. And what ripens depends on our past actions, but also the conditions we're meeting in this life. Does that make sense? Okay, so the next life we might meet very different conditions. And so different habits might come to be more visible, more manifest, because of different conditions. So we can't really judge, basically what the teachings say is if you really want to know what you were like in past lives, look at your conditions now. But that's really only in reference to really recent past life, because that's sort of what is the condition for whatever rebirth you had, at the time of death. So, but if you want to know what your future lives are likely to be like, you just look at your mind. Because that's what's going to be present at the time of death. And that's going to be what, is the condition it needs for whatever seed to ripen, for it to ripen. Okay? So, and I think I mentioned last week, everybody needs this step. Even if you're, in this life, you're a person of medium capacity or great capacity, you've done a lot of work that was distracting. You've done a lot of work in previous lives, and it's starting to ripen you, so you have, you've learned the path, certain things have become obvious, then you've already got you've got renunciation or something. So it doesn't mean you don't need to do what you need to do to have a good rebirth, because we need a series of good rebirths to have good conditions to continue our studies, our practices, develop our concentration, have realizations in order to become liberated and enlightened. So everybody needs this first step. We all need a good rebirth. Then a person of middle capacity decides a good rebirth's not good enough. Because we talked about last time, everybody, you could have great conditions, have nothing but loving, wonderful relationships, have a great job, have all the money you need, have good physical health, and you still die. So if you finally decide, okay, that's not good enough, the trade-off between, having good food to eat and having a good place to live and da-da-da-da-da, doesn't make up for loss, aging, illness, and death. So they're developing this, this, what they call disenchantment with the desire realm. They really have, work on the mind that says, there's really nothing in it for me to live in samsara. Samsara doesn't, yes, there's some things that are nice in samsara. We have pretty views occasionally. There's good food occasionally, all that kind of thing. But it doesn't make up for wars and famines, and even if you don't experience them, it's just not good enough. And so they're developing, they want to get out of samsara. So samsara is just a name given to these cycles of birth and death of the body and rebirth over and over and over again. In order to understand that, you need to really understand what keeps us stuck in samsara. So you need to start developing an understanding of ignorance. The Buddha teaches that the reason we have all these negative habits and these negative actions is because we base everything on a misunderstanding about how we exist. We think everything exists as having, an inherent nature, an independent, permanent quality that is a person. So like when we go, oh, this person's like that, I'm like this, blah, blah, this is grasping at an inherently existent person. And even though intellectually we understand that people are not permanent, that everything changes, that we know that we all see gross impermanence, we see things break, we see things wear down, we see people die, we get that. We don't really understand that we still react to living beings as if have a nature that is permanent, somehow concrete, independent of causes and conditions, that we have a nature, and our nature is particularly important to us. You know, so we really cling to this self. It's often called ego in English, but that doesn't quite get at it, because we need a healthy sense of, you know, we have to have a healthy sense of ego, a sense of functioning, because we do exist, but we don't exist in the way that we think we do, or act as if we do. Things appear to us as having this inherent existence, and that's a mistake. And from that mistake, we think we're separate from others. We think that, you know, I'm independent over here and you're independent over there, and that, you know, what happens, you know, even when we're in the same room together has, you know, no bearing on each other. You know, but it's not true. We're all interconnected, interdependent, just like apple trees are dependent on apple seeds. Everything that arises is a dependent arising. So this is one of the things that we want to work on to understand. And the Buddha said, until you do that, you cannot get out of samsara, because ignorance is the foundation for samsara, this grasping at a self, whether it's yourself, grasping at the self of others, or even grasping at the self of things, inanimate things.
And even concepts too, right?
Yeah, we grasp at ideas. It's like we grasp at things like it's right and wrong, and we forget about it depends. You know, if there's something happening to us that we don't like, you know, we think it's wrong. And it is wrong. It's just absolutely, or not fair, my personal favorite. It's not fair, you know. And this is not accurate according to the Buddha. So the more we get comfortable and familiar with dependent arising, the more that we can really internalize something that we get when we just talk about it from a, you know, intellectual point of view, the more that we can understand there's a consequence to saying something is a dependent arising, and that we're part of the dependent arising of everything we experience. You know, it's not separate from us. So somebody beating us on the head with a mango is not separate from us. It's not some evil harbinger with a mango. Don't ask me where I get these ideas. But, you know, that somehow we have been a condition for this situation to arise, but probably not this life. Maybe. After all, we have mango trees. We could have done something. If you ever threw a mango at a chipmunk, you know, maybe that's the reason that you're getting beat on the head with a mango. Okay. Alrighty. Then someone who's developed a greater capacity, he goes beyond renunciation and beyond the disenchantment with samsara for themselves. They go beyond that to where they want to, it's not enough for them to get out. They want everybody out. And so they want to figure out what is the method to help everybody get out. So they have to go beyond just liberation from samsara. And so in our system, liberation from samsara is nirvana. It's peace from ignorance, basically. It's the peace that arises from wisdom. When ignorance is no longer present, you have peace. But that's not sufficient for you to be omniscient, be able to benefit all other sentient beings. You need enlightenment for that. So you need full, complete enlightenment Buddhahood. The Theravadan tradition considers nirvana enlightenment. The Mahayana tradition does not. So there's a distinction. So when you read terms like I'm sorry.
Sorry, repeat again. So nirvana is not enlightenment?
Correct, in this tradition. Now, if you read books by like Ajahn Chah or the Forest Monk tradition, and other Theravadan traditions, like the tradition of Thailand, Cambodia, I think, then, you know, they will use these terms differently.
So enlightenment here is beyond.
It's Buddhahood. It's where you have, you know, so you're liberated. You've also reached nirvana, but you're cleaning up the last bit of contamination in the mind stream that's obscuring you from omniscience, the ability to know everything at every moment. Did you
And it's an arhat, or what is an arhat again? Is that someone who's
liberated?
liberated from samsara?
But a Buddha is an arhat because a Buddha is also liberated. This is what makes, you know,
Okay.
jargon
Right,
so
right.
difficult because, so they often call bodhisattvas, you know, Arya bodhisattvas on the 8th, 9th, and 10th grounds are Mahayana arhats because they're liberated, you know, but they're not Buddhas yet. So, arhat just means someone who's liberated. It's not a big deal unless you read in lots of other texts where the terms mean something different. So, Arya, Arhat, I think, comes from the same root. But Arya just is the Sanskrit word for superior. And superior in the Buddhist context means they have realized emptiness. They have now had a direct experience of how things actually exist, not how they appear to us. You know, things appear to us without, you know, based on our ignorance as if they exist inherently. And so that's the, you know, demarcation zone. That's the difference. So the skills that a person of great capacity need to cultivate is, you know, this ability to have universal compassion, universal love, universal concern, where you really, no longer is your compassion limited to people that you know or people that you see something on TV and you have compassion for them, you know, or people that you like. Now you have compassion for anything that has a mind. So it has nothing to do with whether they're helping you or harming you. You just have compassion for the fact that they're stuck in samsara. And you understand that they are out of control due to their ignorance and all the deluded states of mind that arise from that ignorance and all the, you know, unskillful actions of speech and body that arise from that, all those levels of ignorance and then the disturbing states of mind. So in the last capacity, you're trying to develop a mind that for everything that you do, so that you are always doing it, you know, for the benefit of others. So you come to class because you want to develop the mind that becomes enlightened in order to benefit all sentient beings. So this is, you know, so that a bodhisattva is someone who has realized that mind, that aspiration to become enlightened for the benefit of others, so that they have it 24/7. They never not have it. They actually, it's one of the only states of mind they say becomes a main mind. So normally, like our states of mind, you know, like angry in one moment, we have compassion in the next moment, you know, that kind of thing. And there are other states of mind in there, you know, like sometimes with our love we have wisdom too, you know, shocker. But, you know, but when you have bodhicitta, of uncontrived bodhicitta, where there's no effort anymore, it's spontaneously, effortlessly arising in every moment of mind and influencing every moment of mind, it is now considered a main mind because it's influencing all minds. It's irreversible, but people can give it up. They say Sherry Pucher gave it up. I think the path of accumulation. You know, there's a story about Sherry Pucher where a beggar asked him for his right arm. So Sherry Pucher cuts off his right arm, hands it to the beggar with his left arm, and the beggar is insulted because his left arm or left hand is unclean. And Sherry Pucher gets very disgusted and says, "There's no helping these sentient beings." So he gives up his bodhicitta. You know, he just, it's like, not like you can, it's not like it reverses, but you can just decide it's too hard. Or that's just not possible.
Yeah.
Because bodhicitta is an aspirational mind. It's the aspiration to become enlightened. So if you decide it can't be done, then you can give up. So they say he then went to the path to nirvana, achieved that, and then had to start again. The Mahayana path. So,
Without an
Yeah.
arm.
without an arm. No, he's been bored several times in between. We don't have to worry too much about this body. We'll get a new one. We just want to know what type of body it's going to be. We want to make sure our actions, body, speech, and mind, are conditions to have a good rebirth. Because we can't do much as a mosquito or as a flea or, those things. So in the last path, you're working on developing bodhicitta, which means you're developing compassion. So in the module on bodhicitta, it's about learning how to think of all beings as having been your mother, which connects back to this idea that consciousness has no beginning or end. So if consciousness has no beginning or end, what does that say about the number of minds out there?
Infinite.